Hey, Shalom, Shalom. I want to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. I wanted to, just bring out an article. Peace and salutations to the elect also as well, who are of the house of David, the Yahawadah, who is slated for salvation in the coming from the coming destruction, right? So I wanted to make this a brief, like a video, just kind of touching on the recently unearthed, audio of the great Ronald Reagan. Just being a racist. I mean, the black community has been saying it for years. Even if you do a minor search, you didn't even need the internet to know. Just go into a minor search of Ronald Reagan and Reaganomics, and it was totally destructive of the so-called black community in the 80s, which, we all know that the crack cocaine epidemic came from a 1980 deal made with the Ronald Reagan administration and the Contras of South America, where they basically the United States government under Ronald Reagan sold guns and weapons to the Contras for and in return the government bought the drugs from the Contras, and they set up a guy named Freeway Ricky Ross in L.A. in the L.A. area, and his handler was a CIA operative. All of these things can be backed up. All of these things are facts. Actually, court documents on it. All true, and this is all under the watchful eye of Ronald Reagan, who was the president at that time, who was running the government. So, with that being said, white supremacy, right, was being practiced. And see, that's the thing. The so-called white people going around calling so-called black people racist, but you're actually in power. You're enacting your racism. All right, so we don't have any power to basically enact our hatred towards the so-called white man. But the so-called white man's in power. So as those tapes describe Africans, which those aren't our people, those are most likely Hamites, right? So we don't have no love for them either, but it highlights how he feels about the dark nations, or the so-called white man who's in the power seat, how they feel about the dark nations, right? And in turn, if you think they hate the Hamites, they really hate you niggas more, all right? And don't get it twisted, they know you niggas are the true Israelites, right? So-called black, so-called Latino, so-called Native American. All right, so I just wanted to read this article. But I use that as a backdrop, that story about how his administration, basically was a big drug dealer, and created the crack epidemic that was in the black community in the 80s, that is famous now. And now you see that the Lord has returned the favor with the opioids to these so-called white people. All right, so yeah, so under his watchful eye, our community was decimated, and the so-called white man, said that was second to the 1950s. The 1980s was the best decade for so-called white people. Well, I mean, we can't go backwards; it's only going forward. So let's get this article, because now the so-called white man is starting to realize that everything that he won, or everything that he's ever been successful at, was all in debauchery. The beginnings of it was always never from a good beginning. Even the formation of the country of America is from blood, in Numbers 35 and 33. Matter of fact, let me get that. This is Numbers 35 and 33. So ye shall not pollute the land wherein ye are wherein ye are. For blood it defileth the land, and the land cannot be cleansed of the blood that is shed therein, but by the blood of him that shed it. Right. So and so basically, yeah, the Lord, the Lord sat back and watched you, create this country off of blood, off of bloodshed, off of destruction, debauchery, stealing, lying, killing, a whole lot of it, a whole heap of it. And then when you form the country, you say, well, the Lord gave us this place. Well, he said that going back to our forefather Isaac, he said that you, Esau, would rule the world, but by the sword. And what did you do? You used it. You used it to rule the world. You have the world now, and you're complaining about how you got it. See what I'm saying? Like the scripture says, your sons and daughters should complain of an ungodly father. Well, hey, too late, man. You got it, man. You can't complain about what you already earned. All right. The Lord said you would have these things, but you would use the sword. So this is a part of this is how you were going to gain the world. That's how we know that you are the Edomites, all right, according to the Bible. All right. All of that killing, raping, robbing, lying, stealing, all of that stuff is a part of your sword, your media, which backs up, that's all part of your sword. The so-called white man can't sit and say, he's not this way. You know what I'm saying? This is exactly who he is. So let's go back to the article. I might want to pull a script. Salakia. Yeah, so all right, so this is from the Washington Post. It says the new Reagan tapes are ugly but not surprising to a lot of black Americans, right? And first, before I get that, I want to pull one more script from Job. (14) 14 and 4. And it says, Job 14 and 4, it says, who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean thing? Not one. And you know what I'm saying? So basically, America was formed off of bloodshed, was formed off of, rape, robbery, murder, the Israelites, right? All 12 tribes. And basically, Ronald Reagan is a representation. You see, because what they try to do is, in today's world, they try to, we're talking about the conservatives, or you know them as Republicans, or hell, even Democrats. Here in America, you see, Ronald Reagan has become something of a beloved figure to the so-called white man and his acolytes. When they speak of Ronald Reagan, they speak of him in glowing terms, and as somebody who did a speech that had described America as the shining hill on a city, or the shining city on a hill. His Reaganomics were tremendous for the so-called white man. Gave birth to a lot of things for so-called white people in the 80s. And they basically partied away in the 1980s. That's when, your guy, Donald Trump, he really became, world famous, or actually American famous. He became a socialite in the 80s under Ronald Reagan's programs. He loved Ronald Reagan, which is not hard for us to understand the links to white supremacy. These are things that are all linked together. So it's not surprising to know that Ronald Reagan is a hardcore white supremacist that hated you Israelites, right? Why else would he sell drugs in your neighborhood so brazenly, right? And then defend it before he died. So let me read that again. It's Job 14 and 4. It says, who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. So you black people trying to defend the Ronald Reagan and Reaganomics, man, you ain't nothing but a grade A coon. That's all you are. You can't bring a clean thing out of an unclean thing. Esau is an unclean beast, and you can't make him clean all of a sudden. He's always going to be dirty and disgusting. All right, that's just what it is. All right, let's go into the article because I didn't want to make this too long. Read it again. It says from the Washington Post. It says the new Reagan tapes are ugly, but not surprising to a lot of Black Americans. All right. It says when politicos on both sides of the aisle are bemoaning our current political climate, they often point back to previous eras when the president displayed decorum they believe was befitting of the Oval Office. President Ronald Reagan has been among those cited by those noting just how unorthodox President Trump and the current Republican Party is in worldview, demeanor, and action. But new audio tapes remind us that the Reagan many Americans romanticize was a very different person in the eyes of many Black Americans. In October 1971 exchange between a then current and future Republican presidents is a reminder that an Oval Office occupant using language suggesting Black people are inferior and subhuman is nothing new, or is not new. Salakia. All right, it says Tim Naphtali, which that's a tribe in one of the 12 tribes. Anyway, Tim Naphtali, a history professor at New York University, wrote about and posted audio of a conversation taped by President Richard Nixon, where Reagan, then the governor of California, used racially offensive tropes to refer to United Nations delegates from African countries. Reagan expressed his frustration with African delegates siding against the United States in a vote to recognize the People's Republic of China. Last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television as I did, to see those monkeys from those African countries, damn them. They're still uncomfortable wearing shoes, Reagan told Nixon. That's how you feel about you niggas, man. If he feels that about them stinking Hamites, which we hate them as well. I mean, we can't stand. I can't stand Hamites. It's a tie. If it's a tie, it's a tie for second with the Hamites and the Moabites. Those are two disgusting people that I can't fathom. Even I don't like the sight of them actually. The Edomites are clearly number one, but the so-called Chinese and the so-called Africans, them disgusting Hamites, those Barack Obamites, right? I don't really fuck with them too tough, you know what I'm saying? So that's just a personal thing for me. But Moab and Hamite, ugh. Anyway, says Nixon laughed, wrote Naphtali, a former director of the Nixon Presidential Library. But that initial conversation further in anger in Nixon that helped shape his already prejudiced views towards Black people, Naphtali wrote. Nixon's anger at the UN delegations from African countries for the loss was misplaced. His own State Department blamed factors other than African voting, including maneuvering by British and French behind the scenes for the loss. But Nixon would have none of it. The Africans were to blame. Previous tapes had already revealed the extent of Nixon's racist views, but the tape represented a more blatant example of Reagan's willingness to traffic in stereotypes than we have previously seen. But many people were less than shocked to hear it. And just reading a bunch of tweets, from Shirley, it says Sherry Lynn Eiffel. Yeah, just niggas not understanding that America was built on destruction. It was never for you. This is not your rest. The Bible's been telling you over and over and over again. And you niggas just refuse. You just refuse to take the hint. And it's a big flashing light in front of you. This is not your place. They keep telling you. You know what I'm saying? And the president Donald Trump has been telling you as well. You're not wanted. You're not truly an American. You're just visiting. Okay. Who are you to talk to me? I'm a so-called white man. Those type of things. Go back to your country. Well, hey, look, guess what, man? We would love to go back to our country, but before we go, we need a parting gift. All right, which our country is Israel, right? So the Lord said He's going to return to destroy this place, right? So when this place is destroyed, then we'll go back to Israel, right? Because we ain't going back to Africa. And by the way, the Lord promises that we're not going to go back home empty-handed as well. See, we're going to take slaves with us as well. So we're not going to take nothing from America. I mean, America's just going to get wiped out, through intercontinental ballistic missiles, right? The Lord promised us that. He promised that America would be wiped off the earth. All right, it will be nothing but the only thing that's going to be living here is going to be doleful creatures. All right. It's nothing going to be sand. All right. So it's just going to be total destruction. Nobody will be living here in America anymore. This will stand as a representation as to the wickedness. All right. That you don't want to do on earth in the sight of the Lord. So He promised us that America is going to be destroyed, and that's what's going to happen. So His words are not going to come back void. So anyway, I don't want to go into too much. All right, so it starts giving examples of Reagan, being a racist. It says Reagan is largely credited with amplifying the stereotype of black women being welfare queens, right? Never forget that so-called nigger woman. He called you welfare queens. You want to know how it started? It started with Ronald Reagan. It says abusing taxpayer dollars to support lazy and promiscuous lifestyles. Oh, man. Damn, he really didn't like you nigger women. It says historians and lawmakers point to the policies disproportionately harming people of color as being the foundation of his war on drugs. Never forget, he started that war on drugs. Really, it started under Nixon, but he continued it in a long and hard way, even though they were the biggest drug dealers. His administration was the biggest drug dealers on earth. All right. And even documents in courts, someone actually lost their life. A reporter, I forget his name. He died mysteriously in a suicide where they found a body with 2 bullet holes in his head. Let me repeat for you, okay? I forget the name of the you brothers can look this up. All right, you can Google it, whatever you want to do. But there was a guy who was a reporter in the 80s who unveiled this story and was stalked for the rest of his life, and mysteriously, all right, in his garage, all right, he shot himself twice in the head. How do you shoot yourself twice in the head? Okay, so I'm gonna just leave it up to you brothers to think about that. All right, so Jeremy Renner actually played in the movie. You brothers know him from what's the guy who played he was in the Avengers movie. He was the guy with the arrow. I can't think of his name. The one that was real accurate with them arrows. But he played in the movie that detailed basically Ronald Reagan and his administration doing this, and basically setting up Freeway Ricky Ross to be one of the biggest drug dealers at that time. All right, so I'm gonna continue. It says, acts like these have been far more instrumental in shaping Reagan's legacy with black Americans than those often highlighted by conservatives. All right, it says, so perhaps it should be a little surprise that Trump, who 51% of voters believe is racist, according to the recent Quinnipiac poll, shares a slogan, "Make America Great Again." Reagan used in his 1980 campaign. Trump says he did not know about Reagan's use of it. It says Trump has been accused by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, among others, of adopting the slogan to covertly say "Make America White Again," something critics say Reagan more discreetly communicated to the white working class voters who delivered the White House to him. It says the history of the presidency shows that there have been numerous races from both parties to occupy the Oval Office. But since the civil rights movement, expressing racist views in public is a political liability. All right, which basically the so-called white man had to hide his wickedness, how he really felt about you niggas. But now they don't give a damn no more, right? It says the current debate, of course, has arisen in the wake of Trump's Twitter attacks on 4 minority congresswomen and the city of Baltimore and Representative Elijah Cummings. Trump has repeatedly defended his statements, tweeting, "I don't have a racist bone in my body," just like Ronald Reagan said, right? Ronald Reagan says he don't have a racist bone in his body. Well, obviously he's dead now. Call hello, how about Shamar Shah for that? But guess what? He's gonna come back. All right, and he's going to serve out his term in slavery before he's annihilated for good. Just like the rest of you so-called white people, you, according to the Bible, are the only nation out of the other 17 nations that are not slated, all right, for salvation. Deal with it, all right. Get over it, like you tell so-called black people. Get over it. Deal with it, all right. Why are you complaining? That's what we're going to tell you in the kingdom. Why are you complaining? All right. You're just inferior. Just accept that you're an Edomite and you're inferior, and that slavery was always your destination. You're destined to be slaves. All right. So I have some so-called white people that I interact with that understand this, right? And they know that this is their destiny. All right. So as Neftali wrote, the most novel aspect of President Donald Trump's racist jibes isn't that he said them, but that he said them in public. Yeah, man. So I just wanted to kind of pull up a video real quick. Just kind of type it in, man. Just see how everybody's kind of reacting. Cause I thought it was quite funny, Yeah, Salakia.
You want to support Roller Mark Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. Only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roller Mark Unfiltered. By going to rollermarkunfiltered.com, you can make this possible. Black people knew Ronald Reagan was chicken shit. We knew Ronald Reagan was a damn racist. But now all of a sudden, audio recording has been released of a phone conversation between Ronald Reagan, he was the governor of California, and Richard Nixon when he was president. Y'all remember, Richard Nixon taped everything. And Lord, praise the Lord for his taping, because we have had some insights into the bigotry and racism at the highest level in America. Now the tapes, folks, were private because he resigned. So what happened was they were moved to the Nixon Presidential Library. Now, when the National Archives originally released the tapes of the conversation in 2000, let's be real clear, they punk asses redacted, no, I'm saying that's right, they redacted the racist part to protect Reagan's privacy. So why weren't these tapes released when he was running? Listen to what happened.
Last night I tell you to watch that thing on television last night, that did. Yeah. To see those monkeys from those African countries. And they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes. Well, and then the tail wags the dog there, doesn't it? Yeah. The tail wags the dog.
Okay, it was 1971, and they were talking about something that took place between African diplomats at the United Nations. Reagan refers to these African diplomats as monkeys and says they haven't even got used to wearing shoes. One of the Reagan biographers, Monique, comes out and says in all of his research, he had never uncovered Ronald Reagan being racist. He launched his campaign in Philadelphia, Mississippi, which is only known for one thing in American history: the murder of 3 civil rights workers, Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman. I mean, we don't know about Philadelphia, Mississippi for nothing else. That's one. Who was the originator of the welfare queen? Ronald Reagan. Who was the man who absolutely opposed MLK's birthday as a federal holiday? Ronald Reagan. Who was the man who said, no way in hell will I sign a bill putting sanctions on the leadership in South Africa, the white racist leadership in South Africa? Ronald Reagan. Black folks, we always knew. Now white folks like, oh my God, Reagan called them monkeys. Not our Ronnie.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
What do you have to say about Ronnie?
Oh, I'm sorry, I left out one. Y'all do also remember when the Black Panthers came to Sacramento, the state capital, with the long rifles? They immediately banned that shit. When black folks roll up with long rifles, they like, oh, we gotta change this damn law. We ain't having that.
It was legal.
It was legal.
It was legal for them to be there with the
Dewey P. Newton studied the law says if you carry long rifles and point them in the air, it's legal. So they went to the state capitol with them guns. When them white folks saw Negroes with long rifles, they said, oh, hell no, we got to change that law. Ronald Reagan signed into law.
Yes, so the thing is, the GOP is indeed still the party of Reagan, just like they've been saying they were, and we were trying to disagree with them, but of course it's accurate. And I was in second grade. I think it was Carter versus Reagan. I was representing Carter in the debate. I brought peanuts, and my opponent brought jelly beans. The jelly beans won. Reagan was that kind that kept it, the slip wasn't showing, and he was a consummate entertainer and a consummate politician before, his frontal lobe started disappearing on him. And so contrasting to Trump, of course, Trump just puts his out there. So it's easy for people to look back now, not just at Reagan, but at so many of our leaders during that time who we all know by their policies and actions were indeed racist. But because they didn't wear their racism on Front Street and would still give you a hello and how do you do, that means they're not racist.
And Scott, that's what's hilarious to me. People are like, oh my God, we didn't know. Okay, because after Jim Crow, it was keep this stuff private.
Yeah, the other thing that white Democrats and Republicans did in the 60s and 70s, and even now, right? They let George Wallace be the racist boogeyman, that he would say segregation now, segregation in the past, segregation forever. Now, they sympathized with him and empathized with him, but they let him be the boogeyman, if you will. Yeah. But their racist blood and bones and their policies, but what they said behind closed doors, I wish we had iPhones then or Androids then in the 60s and 70s, because I think we would be, white America would be far more sensitive
but it's
sooner than later.
But Cleo, again, at the end of the day, it's like, look, and this is...
See, like these cool niggas right here, they have no idea what's going on, man. All right? Well, Roland Martin, he knows what time it is. He knows we the Israelites, right? He's full of shit. But these other guys, man, these guys are just on stage, just playing a part, man. They're just cooning out for the so-called white man. So they're playing a part within this narrative of white supremacy. Because make no mistake about it. They're all for white supremacy. They just want it to stay hidden, right? So when things like this come out, they have to say something, and the so-called white man employs them to go out and say what they have to say so they can keep face in the so-called black community. See, they're playing both sides, but really it's the Lord playing both sides on the ultimate hand, right? Or from the ultimate starting point. All right, because he's the ultimate Jake, right? So he's playing the so-called white man thinking, and the so-called white man thinks he's playing both sides, which is why he pays off guys like Roland Martin. All right, so I just want to pull the script real quick. This is Ecclesiastes 7:13. It says, "Consider the work of the Most High, for who can make that straight which he hath made crooked?" All right, and that's the Lord scoffing at any of you niggas, you out of the 12 tribes, all right, or any of you other nations, thinking that you can somehow humanize the so-called white man. The so-called white man is a crooked, disgusting, dirty beast that deserves to be put in his place, which is slavery, and in the pit, right, which will be a system, all right, that's going to be designed for the so-called white man to perpetually fail. And we're going to come up with reasons as to why he keeps failing, even though we know we set up a system to make him fail. That's what's going to happen in the kingdom, or leading up to the kingdom, all right, because he's not going to be able to enjoy when the kingdom's actually finished. He's going to get burnt, all right, to a bloody stake, right, according to Obadiah 1:18. All right, so let's continue, and we'll get out of here.
Problem when people go to Trump tweeted, "There's not a racist bone in my body." Your own lawyer Michael Cohen has revealed what you talked about. We know the deal, and the problem is, and I'm gonna play a video in a second of a conversation that happened today on Fox, where a white woman was calling Trump a racist, and a black woman, Harris Faulkner, was like, "You shouldn't use those words." Cleo, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, as I've talked about before on this show, no matter how racist some white people are, except for Trump, to some extent Trump as well, people don't like to be publicly shamed. People like to be publicly put on Front Street for what they really are, because how people are perform in public is important. If they're two-faced, and it was Native Americans who said something about a forked tongue. So two-facedness is a part of the culture. None of us are, well, I'm not surprised at all that Reagan is a racist, but what bothers me is that the society is such, and this is something that Trump ironically complained about, is so PC. And even, what's his name, the Attorney General under Obama? Eric Holder. Eric Holder, remember what happened to him?
We call it a nation of cowards. And guess what?
Exactly.
It was Rahm Emanuel who said, put him on ice.
Exactly.
And let me be real clear with y'all. See, this is why y'all don't really want me to write the black book on the Obama administration. What really happened, what had happened was, that speech was given in February of 2009. And what then happened was, they put Holder on ice.
That's right.
They would not allow him to do a national television appearance more than a year. How do I know that? Because when I saw Eric Holder in 2009 in the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation dinner, he said, "Man, I would love to have your show be my first Sunday appearance." He's AG in February. And after that, David Axelrod went at Eric Holder, and that was almost a fight. Axelrod almost got his ass whooped in the Oval Office for going after Holder, and they had to hold Holder back, and Valadier had to go calm him down. Just want to let y'all know that.
Now, wasn't it?
And so then when was his first appearance? When the guy in the New York Times in Times Square got busted with the bomb. That's when Holder was allowed to go on national television, because Rahm Emanuel, the chief of staff to Obama, was so angry that he said America was a nation of cowards.
And this occurred under the Democratic Party rubric. Am I correct?
Yeah, just so folks know. History.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of just raising and synthesizing the fact that when people talk about racism in this country and put it on Front Street of the real, as Holder did, people lose their minds and they can get in a lot of trouble, even if they're black.
All right, folks, back to our road mark unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, you heard me talk a lot about marijuanastop.org. Why? Because I want to keep you informed of investment opportunities that make sense.
Yeah, whatever, man.
This to grow in all the plants, and this is not rocket science. It's pretty simple. It's just an incredible investment opportunity, and that's where our good friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants, and they're black-owned. That's right. They're hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. Go to, and of course, the folks at 420 Real Estate have done something special for our Roland Martin Unfiltered fans. Originally, it was $500, the minimum investment, but they've lowered that to $200 only for the folks who watch this show. So you can participate by losing $200 up to $10,000. Again, a $340 billion global industry.
All right, whatever.
On the heels of President Trump using disparaging imagery to describe African nations, new tapes have just been released by the National Archives that reveal similar language used by the late President Ronald Reagan. So let me take you back to 1971, and it was Reagan, who was, by the way, the governor of California at the time, was on the phone with then President Richard Nixon. And so during this conversation, Reagan referred to leaders of African nations as, quote, monkeys, and then President Nixon gets in his own dig. Here you go.
And last night, I tell you, to watch that thing on television, as I did,
Yeah.
to see those monkeys from those African countries, damn them, they're still uncomfortable wearing shoes.
Well, and then the tail wags the dog there, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The tail wags the dog.
Tim Naftali is a CNN presidential historian and former director of the Nixon Presidential Library. And Tim, there's a lot to get through here. But let me just start with, what's the backstory? How did you get your hands on this tape?
Well, the National Archives has been reviewing Nixon tapes since the 1980s. Richard Nixon sued the National Archives for control of his tapes. That led to a court case. That led to a whole different review. I became director of the Nixon Library in 2007. By that point, the review had gotten to November of 1972, and by court order, we were supposed to go in chronological order. The chronological review ended in 2013. National Archives then did, I was no longer there, but I have a sense of what was done. The National Archives then went to some very important preservation work on the tapes, digitized them, and then they started a re-review. They went back to the redactions, the withdrawn parts from the earliest tapes. And I learned, again, as a private researcher, that private researchers could request certain conversations. Now, when I was at the National Archives, I heard that there was a racist conversation between Ronald Reagan, which was a surprise, and Richard Nixon, which was not a surprise. Now, I didn't hear the conversation. It wasn't part of my job to go back and listen to it. But I made a point to finding out if someone had requested it. No one had requested it, and so I requested. I didn't know exactly which one it would be, but I requested the Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon conversations last year, just after I heard that the National Archives was doing these reviews, and they released them this summer, and they released them at a very interesting time. It's a coincidence, but given our national conversation about presidential racism...
First off, there's no such thing as a coincidence in the world of Yahawadah Shamar Shai. Everything happens for a reason. You have to understand, race wars is a part of the of prophecy. All right, the prophecy says that there's going to be a major race war. All right, matter of fact, let's get it. Salakia. I think it's second address 15, and I started 5. This is second address 15 and 15. All right. It says, "For the sword and their destruction draweth nigh, and one people shall stand up and fight against another, and swords in their hands." And this is referring to the race war that's going to happen here in America, right? Verse 16, it says, "For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes," right? The presidents, your governors, your senators, your House of Representatives. They're not going to regard any of these people. It says, "They shall not regard their kings or princes," right? You're going to have niggas like Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackass out here pleading with the so-called black community to calm down. All right. We could talk about them being super predators. We could talk about how, they're super predators. We could talk about how they, how they got there, but we have to bring them to heel, right, Hillary Clinton? All right, it says, "And the course of their actions shall stand in their power." So meaning the so-called white man can't call 911 and the police show up and contain these niggas. There's going to be a time when that time has ended, and it will be lawlessness, total lawlessness out here, and there's going to be bloodshed in the streets and all kind of judgments will be happening on a high level. Some of them will make them onto social media, right, for the whole world to see, right? And it's going to be bloody, all right? That's just what it's going to be. Race wars is a part of this, and all of this plays a narrative into the race wars. Ronald Reagan's tapes definitely plays a narrative into the race war. Black people, of course, as I started off with an article and a video that talked about how black people already knew this. So-called black people already knew this about Ronald Reagan, but now the rest of the nations, especially of the nation of Israel, and the so-called white man, or the red Hebrew Edomite himself, they've been splashed in the face with cold water, right, after a nice long sleep, and now they're forced to realize that the race war is around the corner, and you're going to have to fight it. That's just what it is. All right, so let's go back and play the rest of this video and get out of here.
I think this conversation is really important for Americans to listen to. It raises uncomfortable questions.
Among those uncomfortable questions, obviously questions about this President Reagan's legacy. I want to read this. This is from the Reagan Foundation. This is what they tweeted out today. We can preserve the dream of America. We need all our people, men and women, young and old, individuals of every race, to be happy, healthy, and whole, and that is what our job is all about. How do you think this will affect the legacy of Ronald Reagan?
Well, I want to raise 2 points. It's very important that the Reagan Foundation endorses that view of this country. What is troubling is that sometimes our political leaders privately do not believe their public rhetoric. I am not a Reagan specialist. I've written about him, but largely with regard to foreign policy. I leave it to the Reagan biographers to see whether this poison that we see in this conversation runs throughout his career. Why does it matter? I'm not interested in future Mount Rushmores. In other words, I'm not looking to raise up certain leaders and bring others down. What I'm worried about is the poison of racism shaping American policy, shaping the way in which we deal with ourselves. And given the concerns today about not the racially tinged, some of it, but racist language, some of it too, of our head of state, I think these are questions we have to ask. Because in Nixon's time, he allowed his views of African Americans to shape his policies at home and abroad. And that was bad for this country. And I worry that our current head of state is doing the same.
We'll leave it, as you said, to the Reagan biographers, but all those Americans, who obviously have their own thoughts and admiration for this late president, Tim Naftali. You have the tape. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing it.
Thank you, Brooke.
Yeah, so basically I'm gonna end on that right there. But you so-called white people, I mean, your whole history. The Lord from Ecclesiastes 7:13 says, matter of fact, let me pull it. It's better to just get the script, you don't want to butcher it. So this is Ecclesiastes 7:13. It says, consider the work of the Most High, who can make that straight which he made crooked, or which he hath made crooked. All right, so you so-called white people are crooked. You were made crooked, and you're going to remain crooked until you're destroyed, according to Obadiah 1:18. And with that, I want to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakal Kadash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Peace and salutations to all the Akim, the Aquathium that's out there, that makes up the house of David, right? That's going to be saved from the coming destruction. Now, I want to say death to America and Shalom.